Afternoon. My name is Andrew Hanscom, and I'm a student at Liberty University studying criminal justice, currently in CJUS 810, with a focus on transnational organized crime. This presentation will explore the nexus of transnational organized crime and terrorism. The presentation will start with a brief overview of transnational organized crime, or TOC, and terrorism. Following these overviews, we will explore the connection between TOC and terrorism and their impact on global security and homeland security, particularly in the United States. We will also discuss the policies developed to combat organized crime groups and terrorism following significant events. Towards the end, we will examine these issues from a Christian worldview and provide a summary and conclusion of the nexus of transnational organized crime and terrorism. The final slide will include references used throughout this presentation. These topics have a wealth of information and research from recent years, and this presentation will only touch the surface. Transnational organized crime and terrorism have a long history. We will briefly discuss their historical context, focusing on the modern era and current policies and connections. The modern era of terrorism is challenging to link directly to the Bible with the different modern ideologies and weapons. Deuteronomy 9:4-6 tells the story of Israel and their significant efforts. Was encouraged not to go out of their way to attack civilians, but to focus on the soldiers. Modern terrorism is often the opposite. When the attacks on civilians did happen, it was based on the wickedness of the enemy, not on their principles or superiority. Terrorism is not compatible with a biblical worldview. The opposition of terrorism is expressed in the New and Old Testaments. The Bible condemns and does not condone everything about terrorism as we see it today. Organized crime has a long history dating back hundreds of years, as we have studied regarding the Yakuza and the Italian Mafia. TOC refers to self-perpetuating associations of individuals and groups who operate crime or illegal activities transnationally. They do this for the purpose of obtaining influence, power, commercial or financial gain, and social control. The activities they are involved with are at least partially by illegal means. Some of these groups are also involved in legal enterprise, often as a way to launder or conceal their illegal operations. They protect their activities through corruption and associated violence to maintain their illegal enterprise and continue the growth of the organized crime they are associated with. While there is no single structural model or hierarchy that these organizational crime groups follow, a structure or hierarchy is often noted. From crime families or mafias and clans, networks, cells, regional groups, each organization operates under their own guidance and rule, often emulating other groups and consistently evolving to both grow and to combat law enforcement and prosecution. The crimes committed also vary by organization. Some are more involved with illegal trafficking, and others are more violent in nature. The evolution of these groups, their tactics, and their structure is a fascinating aspect of the study of transnational organized crime. Transnational organized crime groups act in conspiracy due to the expanded involvement of others in the group and the transnational element of these crimes. In the recent past, transnational organized crime was primarily regional in the scope of its operations and structure. The linkage to terrorism was not frequent. Today's criminal networks have a much larger reach and connection with more groups as they grow. These networks are not regional in the modern day and span around the globe. Transnational organized crime is a growing threat to the United States due to their influence in many contested spaces or failed states where they can quickly grow a significant control. Transnational organized crime is a multifaceted and far-reaching phenomenon involving various criminal groups and activities. It has been a persistent concern for centuries, involving entities such as the Yakuza in Japan, the Italian Mafia, outlaw motorcycle gangs in the United States and Australia, cartels in Mexico. Despite their initial association with specific countries, these groups often have a global presence, expanding their influence. Transnational organized crime encompasses a wide range of criminal activities, including firearms trafficking, drug trafficking, human trafficking, white-collar crimes, corruption, extortion, and other financial offenses. According to the United Nations, 3 key elements lead these criminal organizations: a structured group of 3 or more individuals, the intent to commit severe crimes, and a profit-driven nature, particularly in pursuit of financial gain. Transnational organized crime extends beyond national borders and involves organized illegal activities, usually for financial gain. Many of these criminal enterprises operate with structures resembling legitimate businesses. Differentiating transnational organized crime from terrorism, the primary motivation for transnational organized crime is control and financial gain, while terrorism is typically more politically motivated. Both groups rely on instilling control and fear to maintain their power. Italian crimes family in particular are notorious for their use of control and fear to intimidate prosecutors and maintain dominance in their areas of operation. This has transformed them from mere protectors into entities seeking social and financial control. Terrorism is not universally defined in all legal systems. However, existing statutes generally share common elements. Terrorism involves the use or threat of violence and aims to instill fear not only within the immediate targets, but also among a broader audience. The emphasis on instilling fear sets terrorism apart from both conventional and guerrilla warfare. While traditional military forces do employ psychological warfare against their adversaries, their primary path to victory lies in their superior military strength. Similarly, guerrilla forces, which often resort to acts of terror and other forms of propaganda, seek military victory and occasionally achieve it. Thinking to Viet Cong in Vietnam, as well as Cambodia. Terrorism, on the other hand, encompasses the calculated use of violence to evoke fear and to accomplish political objectives when direct military triumph is unattainable. This has led some social scientists to categorize guerrilla warfare as the weapon of the weak, and terrorism as the weapon of the weakest. In order to incite and maintain the attention needed to instill widespread fear, terrorists must carry out increasingly dramatic, violent, and high-profile attacks. These can include carjackings, hostage-taking, kidnapping, mass shootings, car bombings, and frequently suicide bombings. While seemingly random, the targets and locations of terrorist acts are often meticulously chosen for their shock value. Schools, shopping centers, bus and train stations, as well as restaurants and nightclubs are frequently singled out because they draw large crowds and are places where civilians feel comfortable. The overarching goal of terrorism is to erode the public's sense of security in the places they are most familiar with. Based on the 2024 Global Terrorism Index, the most prominent terrorist groups currently include Jamaat Nusrat al-Islam, Wal Muslim, Hamas, Al-Shabaab, and the Islamic State, with the latter two being the most significant. The Islamic State and Hamas contributed to a significant increase in the total number of deaths in 2024. These 4 groups were responsible for over 75% of the total deaths in 2023, with more than 4,400 deaths attributed to them. In 2014, they were responsible for 25% of terrorism-related deaths. However, it is obviously challenging to attribute deaths or acts of terrorism to specific groups, as some do not claim responsibility for their actions, while others wrongfully claim responsibility to sow fear and gain political power. Additionally, not all terrorist attacks are attributed to specific groups. In some cases, individuals with their motives carry out these acts. Some groups may not claim responsibility for failed attempts to avoid losing influence or drawing increased counterterrorism focus. The notable terrorist organizations such as Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and the Taliban still exist and have significant presence in certain countries. However, the intensified counterterrorism efforts of the United States and the United Nations, along with the focus on eliminating high-level leaders of these organizations, have greatly impacted their involvement in recent terrorist activities. These groups were involved in the terrorist attack of September 11, 2001, as well as being primary targets throughout the 20-year war on terror in Iraq and Afghanistan. The removal of key leaders of these groups has been a primary focus of the United States and its partners. for the last 20 years and continues today. For transnational organized crime groups as mentioned, are typically for social control and financial gain. The motives for foreign terrorist organizations are to gain political power through their acts, which spread fear and the lack of safety. These motives are very different. However, they can collaborate to increase the effectiveness of both groups and gain an advantage within their specific motives. Terrorist organizations typically use violent acts in an attempt to gain political control to increase their threat and create fear. These acts of terrorism have a financial burden that these groups must overcome. In the past, groups started with funding from leaders and support networks. Looking at the founding and growth of Al-Qaeda, the son of a billionaire supported Islam in the fight against Soviet Russia. It had funding from countries and even support from the United States in combating Russia's goal of gaining control of Afghanistan. Following Russia's withdrawal, the focus moved to the United States when Saudi Arabia created a partnership and dismissed the involvement of Al-Qaeda. When funding from support networks diminished, these groups have looked to other means to gain financial support for their activities. Transnational organized crime groups have nearly sole motive of creating financial gain and are also involved with illegal activities. These groups begin to partner in the trafficking of illicit goods, services, corruption, and other activities to grow the financial gain of the transnational organized crime groups and support the activities and motives of the terrorist organizations. This has increased the span of influence for transnational organized crime groups and the opportunities for terrorist organizations. Between transnational organized crime groups and terrorist organizations is becoming increasingly blurred. Both groups pose a significant global threat due to their shared illegal activities and disregard for the law. While terrorist groups typically have political motives and rely on funding from activities that transnational organized crime is involved in, the latter is primarily driven by financial gain. Despite their differing objectives, the collaboration between these groups strengthens their organizations and profitability. Distinguishing between the two types of groups may no longer be necessary, as their shared focus on financial gain drives their collaborative efforts impacting global security. This partnership allows them to leverage each other's strengths, exchange resources, and enhance the effectiveness of their criminal activities, regardless of the motive or end state. This gives significant worldwide reach to transnational organized crime groups to further their illegal activities and nearly unlimited funding for terrorist organizations to plan, recruit, and participate in terrorist attacks. A collaboration between the United States, similar to the collaborative efforts to combat the war on terror, is necessary to impact the overall implications of the recent connection of transnational organized crime groups and terrorist organizations, with a lesser focus on distinguishing between the two groups. Between terrorist organizations and transnational organized crime has created an aggravated threat to the United States. Some of these groups have become hybrid entities involved in both organized crime and terrorist activities. They use the border as an access point to the United States for promoting illegal activities and potentially planning terrorist attacks within the country. These groups are well known for trafficking weapons, illicit drugs, and people, and they collaborate with external groups to increase their opportunities. Mexico, as well as Paraguay, Argentina, and Brazil, pose increased threats to the United States, where sophisticated cooperation methods between transnational crime groups and terrorist organizations have been observed to be significantly increasing over recent years. As these relationships grow, the threat to the United States also continues to grow. The increase in technology has expanded the reach of both types of organizations in marketing their services, recruiting new members, planning and executing their specific missions. An example of this link between transnational organized crime and terrorist groups infiltrating the United States is Jamal Youssef, who was prosecuted for conspiring to provide military-grade weapons to a foreign terrorist organization in exchange for over 1 ton of cocaine. This was one isolated example, however, there are many more. Due to these factors and many others, the collaboration among both transnational crime organizations and terrorist groups is going to continue to expand without direct measures to eliminate these partnerships. These collaborative efforts give joint access to streams of illicit fundraising and provide provides increased opportunities for these groups to cooperate and work together to further impact the security of the United States. After the September 11, 2001 attacks, President George W. Bush issued Executive Order 13224. The purpose of this executive order was to establish a more efficient process for identifying, designating, and freezing financial assets or individuals associated with terrorist organizations. The Bureau of Counterterrorism within the U.S. State Department was responsible for enforcing this executive order. The criteria for designation under this order included that a group or individual must be foreign to the United States, engaged in terrorist activity, or have the capability and intent to engage in such activity, and that their actions must pose a threat to the national security of the United States. On July 24, 2011, President Obama issued Executive Order 13581 to block the property of transnational organized crime groups. This executive order reflected the growing impact of organized crime at national and international levels, highlighting the economic and political implications of these groups. It also introduced financial sanctions against individuals or groups that provide support to transnational organized crime entities. Additionally, policy creation is needed to address both transnational organized crime groups and terrorist organizations. It is important to consider that designating one entity could lead to its identification as the other, essentially blurring the distinction between the two. This is because both groups are increasingly collaborating and supporting each other's activities, which directly impacts the illegal activities carried out by their partner groups. 1533 states, "Do not be deceived. Bad company ruins good morals." This verse stood out to me when examining the link between transnational organized crime and terrorism. We have studied organized crime, and it has existed for hundreds of years worldwide. Businesses of these groups have grown and adjusted to modern times, and the crimes these organizations are involved with have also adjusted. Terrorism has also been prevalent for many years. The current generation has grown up during the consistent war on terror. Many people are born or raised in these crime groups or terrorist organizations or become indoctrinated at an early age. Bad company can certainly ruin good morals. Surrounding yourself with bad people will typically lead to the wrong results. Proverbs 1:8-19 reminds us, "Plead with young men to pursue wisdom, not the paths of wickedness." The Bible clearly reminds us to connect with people who bring light, not darkness. These organizations are selfishly focused on wealth and social control by any means necessary. The amount of violence and harm these organizations have caused is tremendous and has impacted the people and economy throughout the world for many years. Furthermore, the illegal activity has affected many other people in different countries. The focus on reducing the span of control and social influence these groups have is critical for the safety and freedom in the United States and around the globe. Organized crime spans centuries, persisting today as a global threat. Terrorism continues to pose a significant danger worldwide, including within the United States. The security landscape is rapidly evolving, presenting challenges that are difficult to keep up with. Of particular concern is the growing collaboration between transnational organized crime groups and terrorist organizations, which presents an imminent threat. Despite the implementation of executive orders impose substantial financial sanctions on these groups, the threat remains. As these organizations adopt a hybrid model combining elements of organized crime and terrorism, the risk intensifies. While their objectives and consequences may differ, the national and international implications are equally significant. Establishing comprehensive policies and task force to forge connections between these groups can facilitate greater information sharing, potentially overcoming past limitations due to classification. Organized crime is typically driven by the pursuit of financial gain and social control, while terrorism aims for political gain through threat and fear, often removing the sense of safety. The nexus between these two groups is intricate and evolving. The collaborative activities between both types of organizations have led to the erosion of political, social, and economic stability in many countries. Their collaboration allows each group to advance aspects of their goals through mutual support, manifesting in various ways. highlighting the need for significant efforts to combat this growth.